Namaste, and thank you for tuning in. It's really good of you to do that. I want to give you some background about myself. Ironically, I've been an occultist probably since 11. Uh, I was drawn to it like a moth to the flame. The first attraction, if you like, was tarot cards. Um, However, when I was younger, I did try and summon a dead uncle because I'd never seen him. And I must admit that I summoned something. I don't know if it was my uncle, but it made me hide under the bed covers. However, let us look at what I understand as an occultist of at least 50 years. What do I understand about occultism? Well, I don't think it really matters what your structural belief is. But what I do think matters is the way you operate within that belief system. I think that's really important. And the other thing that's also incredibly important is meeting the right people. If I'm going to be frank, there's a lot of bullshitters in occultism, and that's actually quite dangerous because, as the word suggests, occultism means hidden. Well, that's not just we found some spooky book that nobody knows about. This is really much deeper than this. For example, if we actually trace occultism back within the English system, the most solid evidence we can probably come up with is Bald's Leech book. This was used for healing, and not only is it healing, it's also astrology. There's also languages from Old Norse, there's classical Latin in there. I think there's smatterings of Greece and Greek dialects. And I believe there's some English and Old English in there. So what does that tell us about occultism? Well, a lot of these people who would be using Leech's book, or Bald's Leech book, if you wish, they would actually have quite responsible positions. There would be doctors, there would be priests, there would be nuns. However, they intermingled their Christian beliefs with pagan beliefs. For example, you weren't supposed to do any bloodletting when the dog star was at its equinox. So these people, on one level, were telling you, hey, I'm legit, I'm a doctor, or hey, I'm legit, I'm a priest, or I'm a nun. But on the other level, they were multilingual. They certainly knew about astrology. And if they're multilingual, one would presume they also knew about the world. But they also knew everything to do with occultism. That includes herb and how to use them. Also, ironically, psychology. Quite a lot of the old, what they used to call cunning folk, were pretty good psychologists. Interestingly, counseling as we know it came from this period, and the good old church classed it as virtually satanic. But it's more than just this. Like I said, if you were going to go and see one of these medieval cunning folk, they would want to know your birthday, they would understand the astrology, they would understand your relationship to the earth and the plants. You would be seen as an entire holistic being. This, I'm afraid, is very, very difficult to do in the 21st century. One, our education is woefully inadequate compared to the Middle Ages. Bald's Leach book proves this. You know, essentially your medieval peasant was speaking Greek, Latin, Norse, English, and Old English. And they could read and write in it, one would presume, if it's in a book. Now, in the 21st century, our language is almost been assassinated. If you read a Victorian novel and now you read a modern novel, there is an absolute chasm of difference. And this is really important because, as you were aware, if you're an occultist, then words are spells. And if the language is not as good, not as rich, neither is your ability to use that language. It's the old abracadabra. What I speak, I create. But if your vocal prowess is lacking, then you're not going to be able to perform the rites and the magic that you hopefully want to. So how does that really affect us in the 21st century? Well, we're coming up against this problem again, except we call it prompts now. If you don't prompt the AI in a certain way, you don't get the right results. If you prompt it in an exact way, you get a better result. So this tells me a great deal that how you think and how you speak creates your world. For example, I have a young friend, she's barely 14, she's had a fairly awful life so far. And I said to her, I'll teach you how to make a vision board. And she's highly intelligent and therefore she's highly skeptical. However, we made the vision board together. And the other day she rang me and she said, everything on the vision board I've achieved, even seeing the group that I wanted to see. And the group she wanted to see ordinarily don't tour, especially to somewhere like Ukraine. So it was a minor miracle, if you wish. So I think this is the very important thing that we have to understand about occultism. It's hidden within us. It's hidden within our actions. It's hidden within our speech. And that's something very, very profound to remember. You know, if we look at the biblical verses, you know, do as you be done by, more or less it's saying the same thing. You know, if you're going to talk in a disrespectful way to somebody, they are going to talk in a disrespectful way back to you. So in a way, you are creating your universe. Well, it's not a way, you are creating your universe. And that's very, very important to remember, because we often go through life bullheaded, pushing, shoving, and not taking into consideration that we're actually being bullheaded and pushing ourselves. Because eventually you're going to get old and you're not going to be able to push and shove as much as what you did. So the point being is that if you don't learn this respect in yourself when you get older, this is going to really play against you, which is how life is. But to recap, I would say that if you're going to be an occultist, then you should really, really investigate occultism. You may find yourself having to learn ancient Greek, or at least parts of it for ritual. You may find yourself having to learn Latin in much the same way, because it's improving your ritual. And you'll find yourself having to speak carefully, because if you don't speak carefully, well, you are spelling incorrectly. And if you're spelling incorrectly, then you are summoning incorrectly. I hope this talk you found interesting. So I wish you namaste.